Welcome to another session after a few weeks of a break because I have been on conferences. And today I'm reading the fifth sub-chapter from chapter 2, and it's called Anika and Feeny again. Anika sat down in the subway and put her head back. The days in Crete, even if they were already a long time ago, had immediately come flooding back. She had fond memories of Scythia, the shore, the shade of the olive trees, roaring sea, even if the days had been long gone in terms of feeling and memory. Behind her closed eyes, the sun traced its arc over the mountain of the gods from morning and retreated into the darkness of her cave in the evening, where Zeus was born, hidden from his father Kronos, the Titan of time. Time eats its children, Anika thought. She remembered Bruno, who had flown back alone a day earlier because he was traveling to Milan via Frankfurt to present a paper at the conference. Only Feeny's boyfriend, her current husband René, had stayed with her and Feeny in Crete. They had a day together in Heraklion. For Feny's sake, they wanted to climb the hill behind Heraklion to visit Kazansaki's grave. Feeny had also taken an interest in the gravesite because she had been infected by Anika's love for the writer. Anika had read passages from his Odyssey to her. It was one of Anika's favorite passages, which she had even written down and carried with her in her handbag. She dug out the piece of paper and read the song of the modern Odysseys. On all my meandering journeys and packed tours, the earth, the seas, the winds fought against me with ferocious power. I was in danger, as I often was, both through joy and sadness, so that I lose the priceless dignity, the precious face of human being. I raised my arms to the heights of the sky and screamed for help, but the gods let their thunderbolts rain down on my head and laughed. The climb brought the journeys and tours of Odysseus to life. The sea breeze made the summer heat bearable, and with every step the view of the sea became wider, the impression of being on an island more intense. Soon, a sea of stones with graves appeared in front of them. Katzensaki's tumulus was impossible to miss, not because it was bigger than others. On the contrary, the border and gravestone were more than plain, and they would probably have been easy to overlook had there not been a large crowd of people from all kinds of countries and cultures there on an ordinary day and without particular signs. Anika, René, and Feeny were obviously not the only ones to hear Kazansaki's voice after his death. René said that not only negative things are infected, there are also, as Richard Dawkins suggested, memes, quasi-positive metastases that spread like genetic changes and go in an almost evolutionary way, or perhaps better, in an inflationary one. What was once attributed to the gods as being the saviors of mankind, Kazantzakis had transferred to mankind. The struggle with one's own fears and the discovery of the unbreakable power of inner strength. Feeny agreed with René and read Kazantzakis epitaph. Δεν ελπίσω τίποτα, δε φόβαμαι τίποτα, Amy Lefteros. I hope for nothing, I fear nothing, I'm free. Kazantzakis spoke from her heart. Kazantzakis was content with what he was, she said. He needed no gods above him, no demons below him, and he feared neither the one nor the other. Being free was his art that he could learn in this place. Yes, I know, said Anika. We can't have this experience on the beach, in the wind, traveling, and in the sun. So why would we need to stand at a grave and hear the echo of a past voice? Anika's words echoed as she sat in the subway on the way to the Munich Olympiastag station. Not far away was Feeny's apartment, where she ran her massage studio when she was in Munich. After the email from Feeny that she had received in Tenerife, Anika had planned to visit Feeny. She would also have traveled to Manchester, but Feeny made it clear to her that she still needed some time before she felt fitter. Then she would anyway come to Munich, attend appointments, and check on a fashion workshop. Anika had often stood outside the door of Feeny's studio with sweaty palms and a pounding heart. But this time it sounded hollow inside her. Her fingertips ached. When she pressed the bell button, she felt queasy, but the memories of Crete and the wisdom of freedom encouraged her to ring the bell again. How much time had passed since she had been on vacation with Bruno and she had received Feeny's message about her diagnosis? The days could have been seconds. She had asked Feeny by email whether she wanted her to visit at all. She was all the more surprised when she immediately replied that she was really looking forward to seeing Anika. Anika was perplexed because she thought that now, after her diagnosis, Feeny's operation, and even her first chemotherapy sessions, there would be no meeting like the usual one, if there was anything usual at all with Feeny. Anika's breath caught in her throat. The door didn't open. Had she got the date wrong or the time wrong? But it was Monday, November the 8th, 2010, 2 p.m. Just as she thought she had arranged the appointment with Feeny by email and entered in her cell phone calendar. A little lost, she reached for her cell phone and checked the email. The day and time were correct. Then she discovered another reply email from Feeny, which had only just arrived. Feeny apologized. She would be a little late because she was still at her workshop, but would be on her way to the studio straight away. Anika turned around and looked down the alley. She strolled up and down a little, the uncertainty of what to expect boring into her. Was it the right decision to visit Feeny so soon after her first therapies? Perhaps she wanted to come to terms with herself first, with her husband, her children. On the other hand, she was already back in the fashion business. How close was she to her? How would Feeny's illness change their relation? For the first time, she saw a big question mark behind the history of their relationship. Even though she initially had reservations about contact with Feeny, Feeny had become a fixture in her life over the years. They didn't see each other very often, not even regularly, especially since Feeny commuted between Manchester and Munich. But the connection had never broken. Even though the period when Feeny had young children, she ran her two businesses in Munich. The question of whether the contact with Feeny was right or wrong had become superfluous. Feeny did not waver, stood by herself and by her, and gave Anika support, was able to turn her back to herself again and again to anchor her. She could let herself fall with her and into her, stronger and deeper than with Bruno. In general, she felt that a partner could not fill all the shades of one's other's lives. This also gave Bruno the space to not have to fulfill everything she longed for. And at the same time, it was this complementary experience with Feeny that led her to decide not to give up her partnership with Bruno, nor to see it as an exclusive one. Bruno did not want such a partnership either. His celibacy as a Catholic priest, which Anika felt protected her, prevented him from doing so. He insisted that he had entered into celibacy voluntarily. It seemed to correspond to his self-image. living her own life, creating closeness with Bruno, and succeeded with Feeny as her support. As little as Bruno wanted to give himself completely to her, there was little danger of losing herself to him. Feeny represented a different approach to life for Anika. She lived, radiated, invited to flow with her, in her, with her, on and under her. She was present when she was there and yet remained within her even when she was far away in England. All it took was one email or one phone call. And soon they were seeing each other again in familiar surroundings, but always in unpredictable ways. Feeny had a family, was happy. At least she spoke proudly of the children and with fiery ardor of her husband. The relationship was transparent. Anika came as a customer and she wanted to leave as a customer. Both were free, which allowed them to get involved with each other and let go again. For Anika, the vacation was designed as a test for Bruno, not as a blurring of boundaries for the relationship with Feeny. Even after intense times together, Anika and Feeny made sure to respect each other's roles. But how would Feeny's diagnosis affect their relationship? Would it be their last encounter? How could she support her? How could she even face her? Anika's head was spinning. She froze as one hand suddenly grabbed hers and the other unlocked the lock. It's great to see you here. I didn't expect to see you so soon because I thought you were on vacation or at conferences. You're right. I'd actually planned to go to conferences after Tenerife, but then I got your message and I thought I'd organize and reorganize my calendar around yours. How sweet of you, Feeny said. And she turned to her, and even before she had turned the key in the lock, she beamed at Anika and gave her a kiss, deep, long, trusting, and demanding. Don't worry so much. Everything will be fine. I'm in the best hands. Manchester is not Munich. The healthcare system in England has its peculiarities and limitations, but when it comes to serious illnesses, you'll be well looked after. The University Hospital in Manchester has excellent doctors, and we don't know the details yet. Maybe the disease was discovered in the early stages. Look, I went to my gynecologist for regular checkups just a few weeks ago again, and he couldn't find anything. Feeny opened the door, invited Anika in, and, as usual, showed her the way to the changing room. Should she undress, take a shower, lie down on the massage mattress? Was Feeny going to join her as before? For the first time, she noticed that Feeny didn't have any ordinary shower lotions, but exotic, organic shampoo, which she had never seen in any store before. She dared to lie with her stomach on the mattress and looked at the nude photographs of Feeny that had filled the wall over the past few years. Then she heard Feeny's footsteps, unmistakable on her high heels. Dressed in white canvas that allowed a long scarf from her ribcage downwards to shine through only imperceptibly. Feeny sat down with her, asked Anika to relax. Without opening her top or taking it off, as she usually did, she sat with her back to her on her lower legs and began to caress her feet, kiss her toes, moved closer to her and gently massaged the muscles of her legs. Turned to face her, touched her hip, her shoulder. She leaned over Anika, and Anika could see the slightly reddened seam through the fibers of the cloth that Feeny was pulling through. Feeny's grip was as practiced and firm as ever. She wandered along her spine, wilting her soft sides, moving upwards, stretching her shoulders, pressing her knees into her back, gripping her arms, becoming increasingly firm, though not as firm as before when a Thai massage couldn't have been harder and more stimulating at the same time. She compensated for the less force with which she massaged with her sensitive fingertips, which tangled themselves in Anika's hair, played with it, touched the back of her head, stroked her neck, and brushed along the edge of her ears. Excuse me, if I have to be a little careful about using my belly, Feeny objected and asked Anika, turn round. Anika knew the command, turned on her back. Feeny lay down next to her and stroked her breast with the tips of her breasts. Anika was in a daze as she said goodbye to Feeny at the door. How was it possible that Feeny still was herself, despite her situation, despite everything she had been through in the last few weeks? Yes, she seemed more cautious, but at the same time she was even more resolute, even more intense than before. She responded to the slightest hint of Anika's sympathy for her fate by showing Anika that she didn't need it, that she didn't even want her regrets. Anika realized that Feeny had tried to show her that she was still a woman of her body and her life. Was this an attempt to suppress her situation, to get rid of it? Or were Anika's fears exaggerated? Perhaps the illness was less serious than she and Bruno had read on the internet. While Anika had the feeling that she had only been able to get involved with Feeny with some effort, she felt that Feeny had developed a new, even more central strength and had surpassed herself in this respect. The only thing that worried Anika was that she didn't want to talk to her about her illness. Feeny had been worried about Anika. She had noticed her insecurity and addressed it. But when Anika honestly told her that she was afraid of losing Feeny, Feeny waved her off and put her off, saying that she wouldn't give up yet until she had started to fight. That was all. Feeny asked Anika to be there for her. She could do her no greater favor than to surrender and let herself be pampered by her elixir of love. That would give her confirmation that she still was who she was. Anika stumbled along the street, embarrassed and disoriented. Advertisement lights flashed, looking neither stimulating nor inappropriate. A couple was arguing on a street corner. She passed them. It started to rain, but she didn't feel it. What had happened? Tomorrow she would be on the phone to Bruno, who was starting his new position. The meaningfulness of his new start had not yet made sense to her. Wouldn't he have been better off staying in his professorship of ethics at the university? Why go into the thicket of the church institution, into a stage light that would complicate his not unmoved but self-directed life through multiple constraints? Her life, theirs, both of their lives. Of course, she wanted to support him and would stand by him, come what may. She knew it was the life he had chosen. He had gone into this study, to the academic world, and thus into church ministry in order to change it. He wanted to grow an organism out of a hierarchically structured monster. Within the faculty, which he had temporarily headed as a dean, he seemed to have succeeded to a certain extent on a small scale, at least as far as he could tell from student feedback. His colleagues, he said, were pleased that he had begun to open up the faculty. And after the recent appointments of female members to the faculty in particular, they were also supported by the local bishop. He was full of hope. This progress gave Anika hope for Bruno and for their future together. Certainly, the Vatican still seemed to be largely stuck on the old course. But there were enough forces even there who were interested in and working on fundamental reforms. Bruno told her about a conversation that he had with the head of the Vatican Public Relations Office, and that had opened his eyes. This person was more critical of the church than Bruno was, and would ever have accepted. Above all, he had a clear view of the church's failings when it came to sexual morality and child abuse in particular. As the church was one of the world's leading players in the field of morality, Bruno saw an opportunity to make a political statement within this organization that went beyond the church itself. He told Anika that if they could manage to dismantle this often fossilized and often reactionary bastion of patriarchalism and build a bridge to a future in which LGBT, queer people, women, children, and men, regardless of their orientation, could shape their lives, then it would be worth the effort. Anika agreed. Feeny had opened Anika's eyes to how to deal with darkness. Not to embrace it, not to ignore it, not to let it go down and get down, but to carry on with life, ready to fight and be vigilant. She had made Anika feel the fighting spirit, the concentrated strength with which she confronted cancer. While Anika had not been able to get the word cancer past her lips, Feeny spoke it openly, if only once, to make it clear to Anika that it should not become the center of her life. Before Anika left her, Feeny had explained to her that she might not be able to be in her Munich studio and workshop as regularly as before because she was more tied to Manchester due to her therapies, which were planned in a rhythm but could not be completely predetermined due to preliminary examinations, appointments with the clinic, and the like. Anika had wanted to reassure her that she didn't think her longer and unplanned stays in Manchester were a problem. She and her health came first. She promised her that she could visit Feeny in Manchester if she wanted to. Please do. You're welcome to come to Manchester, of course, Feeny said. If the time span is too long for you, I'm sure you will like my little studio there no less than the one here, even if I've furnished it in a different style. It's in the middle of a renovated industrial district of red brick buildings. It's surrounded by offices of startups, pubs, bars, with a vibrant life that lasts from lunchtime until late at night. That sounds very tempting, Anika had replied. Sure, Manchester is no longer the dingy, rundown industrial city you remember from your English lessons at school or from TV crime dramas. On the other hand, I like being in Munich. Here, I still feel a bit like a budding entrepreneur. The city offers me the distance to family and motherhood, and now also to the clinic. I can read ethnographic literature in the State Library, which I don't have in Manchester. The fashion galleries in England are more avant-garde, but there is a lack of money. The more potent clientele is in Munich. And don't forget, education and schooling are pretty expensive commodities in England. So we, Renee and I, have to make a real effort. Wherever you prefer. I travel a lot, as you know, so I can arrange to see you in Manchester, but I don't want to offend you. Feeny shook her head and said goodbye to Anika. Anika had missed Feeny, looking after her for a long time on the doorstep. It was a very special appointment for Feeny. She could feel Anika's concern for her, even more so than in the past. She had made it easy for her to meet. Did she have any idea what fleas were in her intestines as she awaited Anika's visit? Her first studio apartment since her operation. She had thought long and hard about whether she should or could make the appointment at all. Whether she shouldn't give up this business. Wasn't now the right time to set it aside? It wasn't more than a side business that had become more difficult to plan since she had children. And she had often wondered whether and how she could explain it to the kids. But it showed her commitment to them and the family. She made her contribution both from the studio and from her growing fashion business, even if it required even more investment than it made money. She also wanted to make it clear to the children that she didn't want to be dependent on dad, that she didn't want to live at his expense. And she could proudly explain to them that it was her job that paid the fees for the nursery places and the school fees. Without her studio, the children would not have had these opportunities. Immediately after the birth, she had the children put on waiting lists for the municipal nurseries. She was lucky enough to be allocated a place, but the family had to dig deep into their pockets. The price per child was so high that it swallowed up a large part of the monthly income she received from her studio. A little was left over for the further development of her fashion business, but nothing remained for anything else. René continued to provide for the family for vacations, but his business was also subject to fluctuations, and in the crisis year of 2007, they would not have been able to keep their home without work, particularly her work. And with her help, René was able to hold on to a small investment company for startups. So fighting together had brought René and her closer. They had to cope with the rising exorbitant rents in Manchester and Munich for the family apartment, the offices, the studios. They had no savings to buy them, even if the mortgage had been cheaper than the rents. But they would have had to make down payments and offer security for which they had no financial reserves. The little they had was in Germany. René had also tried to find other sources of income. He worked as a tour guide and consultant and was not above helping out at the bar in a pub at the weekend. His small business was growing. The talks with investors sounded promising. The realizations always took longer than planned. He stretched out his arms further, met with people who had submitted business plans to him in Salzburg, Madrid, Prague, and game developers in Seoul. He had been asked to teach entrepreneurship and sustainability at Korea University Summer School, but this took time away from developing the company in Manchester and reduced his availability for his family, the relationship, and the children. As Feeny looked after Anika leaving, she realized the turning point that her illness meant for her. A time to reorganize her life, to take stock. She closed the door and looked at the rumpled bed. It wasn't just about the children and their chances of getting started. It wasn't just about René and his business. These rooms were hers. She had furnished them as a student. They were the first exhibition spaces for her photos, for her fashion collections. She had made connections here that allowed the fashion business to grow. It wasn't even for the money, not the fashion, not the message, not the massage. Anika had shown her that she, Feeny, was still a woman and not just a patient. A patient who hadn't had ovaries for a few weeks now. She, not just being a mother and not simply being a wife. Feeny had still been able to enchant Anika, had had an effect on her, even though she looked the way she did. Feeny lay down on her back on a massage mattress and looked in the large mirror above the bed, which she had installed herself. She noticed the not quite straight reddish line that ran through her front body, through the dress, gathered it, looked at this drawing of herself, touched the scar with her fingertips, walked along it from seam to seam, looking in the mirror to see if and how they could be recognized. Could she ever feel at home in her body again? She had not yet dared to face René naked, only giving him a brief glimpse of her wound once. Anika was the first person she dared to show the wound openly. She was obviously not frightened. Anika continued to wander through the streets of Munich. Feeny made such a clear impression on her with what she did and how she acted that Anika began to get annoyed with herself as to why she was beginning to doubt Bruno's decision to take up this new position. Perhaps it was the right, courageous step to go more into the public eye than before, even in the face of opposition, knowing full well that he would and could be attacked, and she too. But shouldn't she encourage him? The night had not gotten any darker, the rain no heavier. Feeny hovered in her thoughts, encouraging Anika, and she was looking forward to seeing Bruno and taking the next step in life with him. Thank you very much for listening to this episode, and feel free to order the book, which will be available before Christmas. Just write to Verlag Der Blaue Reiter.de and secure your copy. Thank you so much.